We're looking at the book of Ruth, which is a tale of redemption, a redeemer, which is really has a lot in it. Most of the book of Ruth is written with dialogue, which means there's a lot of talking between the characters, and we would expect that at the risk of stereotyping. It's a book with women, and they talk a lot. And so it's biblical. I stole that from Mars Hill Church. But, it's by far one of the most conversational of all the books. It's pretty heavy, so I thought I'd start off a little lighter today about having a bad day. I thought I was going to have a bad day, but we got our water back on, so it's a great day. And I look forward to it getting better as the Broncos play this evening, hopefully. I hope so, yeah. And thank you for everybody who's rooting for them, for me, all right? Us, yes. Actually, Nadine was a fan before me. Not all days are equally good, right? And this is how you can know if you've had a bad day. You know you're having a bad day when you put both contacts in the same eye. Then you can't see either way, right? You know you're having a bad day when your twin sister forgets your birthday. And you come to church and they forget you. That'd be really terrible. You know you're having a bad day when you wake up and your braces are stuck together. Yeah. You know you're having a bad day when it costs more to fill up your car than it did to buy it. I've had a car like that, okay? You know you're having a bad day when you show up for work and you're greeted by Mike Wallace. This is a little dated, but you know you're having a bad day when your doctor tells you that you're allergic to chocolate, right, Nadine? Oh, she gasps. It'd never be. And you know you're having a bad day when you wake up and find your waterbed has sprung a leak and then realize you don't have a waterbed. Okay? Okay, and that's the way things go sometimes. Sometimes it's not just a bad day, but a series of bad days, weeks, even bad years. And that's where we're at in Ruth. Ruth, Naomi, Orpah, these women are having a tragic time in their lives. And let's look at verse 5. We're not going to read the whole text as we did last week of Ruth chapter 1, but we're just going to go verse by verse and kind of think about this. And specifically, the last section of Ruth 1:5 pretty much sums up the first 5 verses, which took probably 11 or 12 years. Having moved from Bethlehem of Judah, the house of bread because of a famine, to the plains of Moab, to a place that's really not disclosed to us, just the plains of Moab. If you have a King James version, you'll see that it says they sojourned, and really that's probably the best translation. They didn't go intending to stay forever, and yet for this time, in 10 or 11 years, tragedy struck, and for me, verse 5 pretty much sums it up. It says this, "And Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband." One commentator that I read a few weeks ago said, and I don't even remember who it was, it's just in my mind, he stated that it's almost impossible to overstate the tragedy that Ruth faced. To be a widow was a tragedy, but to be a widow and to have lost both of her sons was a sure ticket to a helpless existence, especially in Moab. Those 2 words left without, they're a statement that is deep, a statement that is pain-filled, and I believe probably a statement that is despondent. I say this because as we read through this passage, even today, we will come across things and Naomi will say things, and we, not knowing where she's at, we would say to her if we were with her, some of us would say it after we were with her, but we would say, Naomi, don't say that. We don't understand the depth of her grief. We don't understand the powerlessness that she feels at this moment. She is left without. That is the definition of her life. We know that Naomi arrived in Moab with a family. Many people believe that Elimelech and Naomi likely had some wealth. Now Naomi will return home without a family and without any wealth. And to say that we understand would be foolish. This is how pain plays out in our lives. And no matter how much we know up here, and many times we do understand mentally, we still face, when we go through times of loss, whether it's Naomi or our own loss, we understand that up here we know it's going to be okay, right? Up here we have faith, but in here there's a deep ache. And that's where Naomi is right now. She is in that place of a deep ache. There's a scene in the movie Sleepless in Seattle where Tom Hanks' character, Sam Baldwin, shares his pain. His little son called a radio show. And he says this. She asks how he's going to make it or how he has made it. And he says, well, I'm going to get out of bed every morning, breathe in and out all day long. Then after a while, I won't have to remind myself to get out of bed every morning and to breathe in and out. And then after a while, I won't have to think about how I had it great and perfect for a while. Remember, Naomi's name means sweetness, right? Sweet, pleasant. She was married to a man whose name meant, my God is my King. But Naomi's pain was great. And so what would Naomi do? Verse 6 and 7, let's look at it. When she, Naomi, heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. So you know what Naomi decided to do? Go home. She decided to go home. And so off went Naomi with her 2 daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth. This was a wise choice. Now obviously this was a wise choice because we look in the text and we hear that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. And the reality is this: if you need food, you go to where the food is, right? And people still make moves based on their ability to provide for their family, transfers from jobs or places with a better economy, maybe less taxes. But this was bare bones survival. And Ruth had heard while she was in Moab that what they would have called a God-forsaken place, a terrible place. She heard that God had again blessed the land of Judah with food. Secondly, and without the second fact, the first fact means nothing. Okay, secondly, God had written in his laws that the people who farmed were not to be greedy by combing over their fields for a second harvest. And that they were not to harvest up to the edge of their land. And it was the law that you had to leave some of your produce in the field, your grain, whatever you're growing. You had to leave the edges, the corner edges, and you could not go back for a second time. Now in our way of thinking, that's foolish, right? I mean, of course go back. You grew it, go back, pick it up, harvest it. The numbers are better, your production is better, it makes sense mathematically, it makes sense financially, right? But God said, don't do that. Now, why did the Lord tell the people not to go over the crops for a second harvest? And why did the Lord say, when you harvest your fields, harvest them like a teenage boy mows the lawn? You know what I'm saying? Just get it done. Or maybe that was just me. Why did he say that?
The poor.
For the poor. Yeah. This was God's system of caring for the poor, the aliens, and by that I mean the immigrants, okay, the people who were just traveling through, who weren't Hebrew people, and they were coming through, and this was his system to take care of them. This was his system to take care of the widows who who most of were poor, right? Remember, you can't overstate the plight of Naomi, and also to take care of the orphans. And this is written throughout God's law. What do we call this? Charity. Yeah. This is God's system. It's called. It's the way that God loves people, takes care of people, and it's also called gleaning. How many of you ever gleaned before? Gleaning is awesome. I tell you what, it's one of the most family fun activities you can do. Because you don't have to do it all year, and you're not a farmer. But in Colorado, we used to glean every fall. There was a big food bank, and they would pull a truck out, and those big banana boxes they have, and apple boxes. The farmers on the plains of Colorado, in conjunction with the food bank, would do their harvest, but they wouldn't harvest everything. So they didn't go back. So then, like, what we would do is Cornerstone Church would gather all the families. We would drive out like 45 minutes or an hour, land in this field with all these other people. And I mean, we had children this small out there picking up like squash, I think it was. And then we had people who were retired. And it was an amazing time. And it's one of God's things. And then we took that food to the food bank where it could be distributed. But God's way is this, that He takes care of those who have needs. So Ruth was wise to go out away from Moab, where they likely didn't have a law like this. She wouldn't be taken care of in Moab, I don't believe, into Judah, where God has specifically stated that you take care of the poor. Now, you still have to go pick it, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so Naomi left. Naomi left. Then along the way, verses 8 and 9 and 10, almost forgot 10 there, 8, 9, and 10, we see that then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, what did she say? Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud, and said to her, we will go back with you to your people. We will go back with you to your people. Now it's interesting, this is a prayer. Look at it. It's a prayer. She says, may the Lord show kindness to you. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. This is a prayer. And what's interesting is this. In the book of Ruth, all the prayers are for other people. In the book of Ruth, you don't find people praying for themselves. You find people praying for other people. Second interesting fact is this. In the book of Ruth, all the prayers, as far as we know, now I don't know, I tried to look it up to see if Orpah actually found a husband. I don't know that she did or didn't. But apparently, it seems that every prayer in the book of Ruth is answered. So every prayer was for someone else. Every prayer is answered in this book. Just something worth thinking about. These women, Orpah and Ruth, were good women, weren't they? How do we know they were good women? They loved their mother-in-law. That is that's something, right? Now, just so things, my mother-in-law is going to show up in June. I love her. Okay, I do. She knows I do. But they love their mother-in-law, and not only that. Look at the way that their mother-in-law speaks of them. She said, "May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dad," which would be their husbands, "and to me." They were kind. They were good to Naomi. Good women. Many of you have heard it said at a wedding, you're not losing a daughter, you're what? Gaining a son. Or vice versa, you're not losing a son, you're what? Gaining a daughter. Let's look at verse 11. What does Naomi say? But Naomi said, return home my what? Daughters. She didn't say return home my daughters-in-laws. She said return home my daughters. There was a special loving connection, and she really felt the way of the cliche that we often utter. She went on to say this, "Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." And you see, this is where, we're like, "Ooh, Naomi, that makes me uncomfortable to hear you say this." But she's speaking out of her own loss, out of her own bitterness, and you have to give her credit that she does believe the Lord is sovereign, and rightfully so. She says this, "Why would you come with me?" This is how Naomi felt. In Naomi's mind, there was nothing left. In her thinking, she had nothing to offer. She couldn't have any more sons, and even if she could have more sons, by the time they were of marriageable age, these girls would not have waited. Would have been no good for them. And she was returning emptied of wealth and close family. This is the way that many people, from my own observation and my own understanding, which I'll admit is shallow compared to some of you, but this is the way many people feel after a great loss. There seems to be this feeling that they're finished. And I think most people know in their minds this isn't the case. And they need to be encouraged that way, but they need to be encouraged gently, because they have this gut feeling that they have nothing to contribute or give anymore. Nothing. Running on empty. That's what it is. Running on empty. Breathing in and out. Certainly this is true in this case, and I think justifiably so. It's interesting that in Paul's letter to the Thessalonian believers, he didn't say we don't grieve, did he? But he said we don't grieve as those who have no hope. So there's the grief that is still there. The grief for those that we will miss. And this is certainly true for Naomi, as Elimelech's death and the death of her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, are fresh in her mind. It is true for her personally, because we are in a very real way. And I think it's rare where this isn't the case. We are in a very real way defined by our relationships, aren't we? We're defined by our relationships. When we had children and our children started going to school, and I was young enough then that Mr. Garrett, I turned around and looked for my dad, when my kids were in school, I became Aaron and Danae's dad. I was defined by that relationship. I am Nadine's husband at the bank, among her family and her closest friends. That's my connection. And it literally defines me. What would I do if I lost that? And it doesn't have to be death. It can be divorce, right? Think about the pain of a divorce. And there's a reason that God hates divorce, because it hurts people. It hurts people. Came to that realization when I had to be a monitor for a man to come see his 1-year-old son on his first birthday. Second time he saw him in his life. And it was as if God spoke to me, and God said, "This is why I hate divorce." It can be also from a loss of job, right? You lose your job. It's who you are. It's what you do. And when that happens, we can experience a sense of loss that makes us think, or maybe not think, but feel that we're no good for anyone anymore. No good for anyone anymore. Isn't it strange that some people work all of their lives to retire, only to retire, finding no reason to live, and to pass away shortly afterward. It's a tragedy, isn't it? And so I understand to some degree where Naomi is coming from. Abandonment of a parent, I thank the Lord that I don't have that issue. But Nadine and I have friends who do. It's tough. It defines who we are unless we have a Redeemer. Okay? Verse 14. These were some crying women. Okay? At this they what? Wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Ruth clung to Naomi. Now, this is interesting, and I kind of checked it out. It's one of two situations. I believe I'm giving you the correct one. Oprah Winfrey was supposed to be named after this Moabite widow, Orpah. But from my memory, what I remembered is that the spelling was wrong on the birth certificate. So Orpah became Oprah. Isn't that interesting? Now some people, I did find some sources here and there that said that Oprah's real name is Orpha, and that people mispronounced it Oprah, but I believe that they got the birth certificate wrong. Orpha means fawn or gazelle. J. Vernon McGee sees an athleticism present here. Says this was a very fit woman, is what he believes. And he says something like this: I have no idea why this fit woman would marry a sickly man. And that's his type of thinking. You can almost hear him say that. It also means the nape of the neck. And so a lot of people, and I was surprised as I just double-checked last night, I was surprised how many websites talk about the nape of the neck as a sign of Orpah turning her back on Naomi and leaving. Another contrast. Another person that I read last week, or the week before, said this, that it meant fawn, as in we fawn over someone else. And I know we don't use that term much anymore, but if I fawn over my daughter, what does that mean? It means I just dote over her. She's perfect. She's pretty close, but she's perfect, and none of us are perfect, but it's the way we view. And so you see this idea of it is kind of hard to say what Orpah really meant, but I don't think we probably could be too critical of Orpah, because twice now Naomi said what? Go back. Go back. And as we go through Ruth, you'll understand why. But however, we should marvel at the virtue of Ruth. Where there's a vagueness with Orpah, it's quite clear who Ruth is. It's quite clear what Ruth's name is. Ruth is an old name, and now I really like the name Ruth. But it's an old name, and it's also a great name. I met a lady who lives in Allegheny named Ruth, and I met her at the hardware store, and I always accidentally called her Rose, and one day she said, I wish my name was Rose. I said, my name is Ruth. You can call me Rose. I like it. Yeah. But she said, what I don't like is everybody assumes that I'm Jewish. Now, isn't that strange? Because was Ruth Hebrew? A Jewish lady? No. She was a Moabitess. And so it's kind of odd that we would make that assumption. Of course, we can understand why it would be a great name in that regard in the Jewish faith. The name Ruth means friend, a companion, a friend. And when we're running on empty, when our life has taken a tragic turn, we need friends like Ruth, don't we? We need someone who I will say, listen, it's okay, just I'll be all right, you go ahead. And you would say to me, nope, I'm sticking with you. I'm staying with you. Which is exactly what Ruth did with Naomi. Friends like this, even when you insist that they leave, won't. And I mean in the right kind of way. Verse 19 through 22. Or wait, I skipped a few verses, didn't I? Verse 15. Okay, 15. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. Verse 18. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. This Ruth, this companion, this close friend, insisted to stay. Many of you will recall that for a while, I think it was back in the 80s, this was used in the Christian bookstores and stuff to express romantic and marital relationships. And it was used in weddings. But that's not the context. The context of this is a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law. So if you want to give a piece of jewelry or a pendant that says, where you go, I will go, where you will stay, I will stay, your people will be my people, your God will be my God, give it to your mother-in-law or your daughter-in-law. Okay? That's the truest context of this. Verse 19 through 22 now. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. Let's go to verse 21. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. And this concludes chapter 1. Now, as this return, I believe, was probably terribly difficult. It's hard to go back. It's hard to fill people in on 10, 12 years, especially when such great calamity has come upon you. The questions, the conversations, the explanations. Probably people saying you should have never gone there in the first place. And Naomi, whose name meant sweet, has returned a different person. We all return a different person, don't we? She's returned a different person. Evidently, she was well known to the degree that everyone was talking about her return. It says the whole town was stirred. And the women were all saying, can this be Naomi? And so this is one reason that I actually believe that Elimelech and Naomi probably had some wealth. And that they were known throughout the whole town. And everybody was abuzz over her return. Well, Naomi, still hurting, she just tells him, just lets it out. She says, don't call me Naomi anymore. So you know what she's saying is, don't call me sweet anymore. She said, I'm not sweet anymore. She said, I am what? Bitter. I'm bitter. I am bitter, she said. Call me Mara. Once again, Naomi had a grasp of God's sovereignty because she said, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. The Lord afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. She had forgotten the grace of the Almighty in His sovereignty. And maybe she knew that, but she didn't feel that way. She needed to remember and work toward believing that God is sovereign, that He's good. And there are times where in your life, and the thing that I fear the most is when someone will ask me, if God is good and God is all powerful, then why did He let this happen to me? And I have to say this, it's a mystery. I don't know. But I know this, that God is in control. And that God loves you more than you could ever know. I think that's one of the blessings of being with the Lord someday. It's not like we're going to have less information or more information. We're going to have the Lord's perspective. And at this point in time, this is how Naomi felt. But Naomi would have brighter days ahead. Brighter days ahead. Naomi now was having a personal crisis. She was in the middle of trying to figure out who she was. And I recall a time when one of my aunts, my uncle passed away. And one of my aunts was talking to Nadine and myself. And she said to us, and I don't know if Nadine remembers us, but we were at her home. I believe it was at her home. And she said to us, she said, after 52 years of being married to Uncle Grover, after 52 years of doing ministry together, she said, quite honestly, I'm just trying to figure out who I am now. Naomi's in that process right now. She's trying to figure out who she is because Elimelech's gone. Mahlon's gone. Kilion's gone. She needs to find out who she is because that definition that defined who she was has all been taken away. And she's bitter right now. Now there is a cure for bitterness. Let's look at Exodus 15, verses 22 to 25. Really but we're going to have the whole 25 there. Then Moses, this is in the wandering after they've been freed from slavery in Egypt. Exodus 15:22. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. Now, we had water for no water for 4 days, right? And we have bottled water. I was thirsty. Nadine was even more thirsty than I am because she's more committed to drinking water. And so this is 3 days in the desert without finding water. These people are thirsty, right? When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. What does it say here? That is why the place is called what? Marah. What did Naomi say? Don't call me Naomi, but call me Marah. Bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what are we to drink? You can just see some of them with their hands on their head. What are we to drink? What is wrong with you? Verse 25. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made a decree and a law for them, and there He tested them. But the thing I want you to notice is that when Moses cried out to the Lord showed him a piece of wood, He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. And I know this is a little bit of a typology here, a little loose, but I want to say this, that the cross of Jesus, the wood of the cross of Jesus, takes away bitterness in the life of a person who will allow it. Let the cross of Jesus be cast upon your life. It will transform you. It will change you. So then we have this Moabite woman, young, Ruth, in a foreign land. And she is empty, isn't she? It's not just Naomi, but it's Ruth as well. She has left her family. She has left everything that's familiar to her. She has lost her husband. She has no means of supporting herself and no family except for a struggling widow. What did Ruth have? Not much, did she? Nothing but a barley harvest and God's compassion. Now, I want to say this. Really, I believe that Ruth's conversion was that point when she said, your God will be my God. I overheard Sunday school, and I had to take care of some things, but I heard Steve say something like, those little points where we turn to God, doesn't have to be a formula. I believe Ruth was converted to the Hebrew faith as she traveled with Naomi. And when she said, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. That was her moment of trusting the Lord. Ruth had a redeemer. She didn't know it yet. God had one ready. And here's a thought. I won't be much longer. I think I'm maybe going a little long here, but we usually meet our redeemer when we're empty. Did you know that? You meet your redeemer when you're empty. Think about this. I forgot my Orange Crush bottle. That's so sad on Super Bowl Sunday. 3 of them at home. 3 didn't make it. They're gone already. My doing. But my Orange Crush bottle. Can you imagine going to the Redemption Center with full bottles of pop and saying, I want to turn this in? You don't go to the Redemption Center until when? They're empty. Now I want to suggest this, that generally we don't seek out our Redeemer until we're empty, do we? That's when we find our Redeemer. Here's the deal. In the world, when you're empty and you go back to find your value, how much are you going to get? Say like the Orange Crush, we'll say it costs $1 at the store. You take it to the Redemption Center, how much are you going to get? A nickel. They're not giving you anything for what really was in it. You're just getting a nickel. That's all. That's how the world works. If you're looking for redemption in the world's view, it's always a downgrade. But here's the point. When God redeems you, what is it? It's an upgrade. A definite upgrade. Jesus said this. He said, I come to give them life, and life to the full. One modern paraphrase says this, I have come to give them life better than they could have ever imagined. That's our Redeemer. Now Ruth couldn't see over the horizon yet. She knew it was barley harvest, which is God gives us these measures of hope. And it was barley harvesting. The Lord was going to take care of them. But there was something she couldn't see yet, and that was her kinsman Redeemer. We have a Redeemer, don't we? Amen. And He wants to give us life. And life to the full. And if you don't have that yet today, I pray for you on the day that you're empty. And I pray that you will receive Him as your Redeemer today. If you do that, I can promise you, you will never be sorry. Let's pray.